For more than 2,000 years, a whole civilization thrived on an island, all by mastering its most precious and most unpredictable resource, water. We're talking about the ancient hydraulic engineers of Sri Lanka. And their creations, they were so advanced, they're almost hard to believe. So let's dive into this incredible story of technology, power, and survival. A story literally written in water.
Okay, so this was the fundamental puzzle they had to solve. Just imagine it. You're trying to feed a growing population, build cities, create a lasting culture, but you're in a place where the sky only opens up for a few months out of the entire year. You see, this wasn't just an engineering problem. It was an existential one. And this is their answer. A vast, man-made lake just shimmering under the sun. Now, before we get into the nuts and bolts of how they built these marvels, just take a second to look at the result of their genius. You know, this isn't a natural lake. It's a piece of ancient, absolutely monumental technology.
Right, so let's rewind and start at the very beginning, with the core challenge these early settlers were up against.
The heartland of this amazing civilization was what's known as the dry zone. Now, it had these fertile plains that were perfect for agriculture, but there was a huge catch. The monsoon rains, when they came, were intense, but they were seasonal. For the rest of the year, it was dry, super dry. If you couldn't store that monsoon water, you couldn't farm. And if you couldn't farm, you couldn't survive. It really was that simple.
So how did they tackle this? Well, it wasn't just one single invention. Their solution actually evolved over centuries, growing from these simple little ponds into something truly epic.
In the beginning, the solutions were pretty local. A village would get together, dam up a small stream, and build what they called a village tank, just to meet their own immediate needs. But as the civilization grew and grew, these small ponds just weren't going to cut it anymore. They needed something on a completely different scale, the Great Tanks. These were massive reservoirs, commissioned and funded by powerful kings. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just about being ambitious for the sake of it. It was really driven by necessity. More people meant they needed way more food, especially rice. And to feed everyone, they had to cultivate enormous areas of land. That required a guaranteed year-round water supply that only a network of giant reservoirs could provide. And this is where some truly visionary leaders step into the picture. The story of these great tanks is really a story of ambitious kings. For these rulers, controlling water wasn't just about farming. It was a huge statement of power, of divine favor. It was the very legitimacy of their reign.
And what a lineup of builders. Just look at this timeline. We start way back in the 3rd century BC with King Pandikabaya's early works. Then, a few centuries later, King Vasabha kicks things into high gear. But it's King Mahasen who becomes a legend, earning the title Mineria God. I mean, think about that title. By building these massive water sources, he wasn't just an engineer king. He was seen as a divine provider. It was like he had a godlike power over the lifeblood of the nation. It's an amazing fusion of political power and hydraulic engineering, a tradition that was continued by giants like King Dathusena, and eventually culminating with King Parakramabahu I, whose scale of construction is just staggering.
And this quote right here, it just says it all. This line from King Parakramabahu isn't just a catchy political slogan. It was a sacred engineering principle. It shows this incredibly deep understanding of their environment and a total commitment to harnessing every last bit of its potential.
Okay, let's put some numbers to that philosophy, because they are wild. Take a look at the Parakrama Samudraya, which means the Sea of Parakrama. Its dam is 8.5 miles long. 8.5 miles! The Kalaweva flooded an area of over 6,000 acres. I mean, these weren't just tanks. They were practically inland seas, all created with human labor thousands of years before we had any modern machinery.
Which, of course, brings us to the really big question. How on earth did they do it? Building something this massive meant they had to overcome some huge technical hurdles. So let's take a look at the specific technologies they actually invented. I mean, just think about the problems they had to solve, right? You've got this gigantic earthen dam holding back millions and millions of tons of water. How do you stop it from just collapsing under all that pressure? And how do you release that water for irrigation without the sheer force of it destroying everything in its path? And what about the dam itself? How do you protect it from being eroded by constant waves? Well, their answer to the pressure problem was an absolute stroke of genius. It was called the Bisicotua, or the cistern sluice. And this device, it's considered a totally unique and pivotal invention in the history of hydraulic engineering. You don't find it anywhere else in the ancient world. So here's how it works.
Instead of having just one single gate trying to hold back the full crushing force of the deep water, they built this vertical stone tower, or pit, inside the dam. Water flows from the bottom of the reservoir into this bisokatua, where all its vertical energy just kind of fizzles out. Then, by raising a gate inside this tower, they could release the water into an outlet tunnel under much, much less pressure. It's an incredibly clever pressure reduction system.
Their next innovation was beautifully simple, but it was just as critical. The interface of these miles-long earthen dams was constantly getting battered by wind-driven waves. So to protect them, they built something called a relapanoa, or a breakwater.
And you can see it right here. It's basically stone armor for the dam. By carefully laying a wall of rocks along the entire length of the dam's inner slope, they created a barrier that soaked up the energy of the waves, stopping the soil from being washed away. It's this simple bit of tech that is a huge reason why these dams are still standing today.
So, when you put all this incredible engineering together, what's the ultimate result? What's the lasting impact of this civilization that was literally built on water?
For more than 1,000 years, this amazing network of reservoirs and canals was the lifeblood of the Rajarata, the land of kings civilization. It allowed them to build cities, support huge populations, and create a really rich culture. But after invasions and big shifts in power around the 13th century, the whole system fell into disrepair, and the jungle just slowly grew back over these man-made seas.
But the story doesn't end there. Not at all. On the left, you can see an ancient stone sluice, a relic of a bygone era, right? And on the right, you see a modern-looking reservoir. Well, here's the thing that's going to blow your mind. They are often one and the same. Many of these ancient systems were so brilliantly designed that they've been restored and are fully operational today.
And this is the crucial point, this isn't just history, it is living infrastructure. The ingenuity of engineers who lived thousands of years ago is still irrigating fields, providing water, and sustaining communities in modern Sri Lanka. Their legacy isn't written in stone ruins, it's written in flowing water.
And that really leaves us with a final thought. In a world that's facing huge challenges of water scarcity and climate change, what can we learn from a civilization that saw every single drop of rain as a gift that should never be wasted? What lessons in long-term, sustainable thinking do these ancient water masters hold for all of us today?